Without relationship, you really don't have influence.
I remember at times in my life thinking, why can't I have TV kids?
I am not here to be popular with you. I am here to get you to the next level. And when I get you to the next level, we're going to be great friends.
We grew up in the time where children should be seen and not heard.
For them to get what they wanted and go to the next level, they had to tap into what someone else already knew.
People are going to hear you if you're respectful and kind more than they're going to hear you if you have a major attitude and chip on your shoulder.
It doesn't matter how old your kids get. They will value being pursued.
Whether it's time, words, sometimes money, whatever that might be, their appreciation of it is not on us.
When someone is willing to walk into a scenario and say, I messed up, it immediately drops the walls.
All right, we are back. We're back. So
we're back for more.
It's a good day.
It is a good day.
It's a good day in the hill.
What?
Spring Hill.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a good day in
you keep me on my
empty
toes.
nest land.
It is.
Welcome to Beyond the Nest. Beyond the Nest.
Beyond the Nest. What are we going to talk about?
We are going to talk about our kids. Our amazing children.
Well, other people talk about them. We might as well. Right?
Other people talk about them. We might as well. We've talked about them for, what, almost 36 years.
Almost. Yeah. Yep. So we have 3 boys. I think we've cleared that part.
Wait. Yes. But we're going to talk about how do you pull greatness? How do you extract greatness? How do you raise kids? Or what does the process look like when you're raising kids that you want them to grow up and be amazing human beings? Be good friends.
To be good friends.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. Is what do you think the number one question is as far as parents and in raising their kids? What do they want to accomplish?
Well, I think most people want their children to grow up and be amazing people, like be kids that, will embark and be out on their own and have careers and, get married, have children and live the all-American dream and, just be a great person. Like that's a generalized thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had those dreams for the kids. Like I think our kids turned out pretty great. Like if you don't know who our kids are, you can go look them up on social media. I love my kids. I say this so many times. I would hurl myself into oncoming traffic for any one of my children. I love them. But I also sometimes put out a little bit of a blanket apology because sometimes you hear a word come out of their mouth that, if you're religious, you might not love. So just keep that in mind.
Well, you do that when we go, you do that to me.
I do not.
A blanket apology?
Oh, a blanket. I thought you were saying things come out of my mouth that are like,
oh, there are some things that come out of your mouth.
That was like inappropriate.
Honey, you're being recorded on. You sometimes say things that aren't nice.
Sometimes I say things that aren't nice. I'm a nice person.
You are a very nice person.
How many times have we looked at our boys and said, I want to be you when I grow up? Like legit. Like I love these boys of ours. They're amazing. They are doing wonderful things. They are, some of them I can't even talk about intelligently because I don't really know what they do. I just know they have companies and they're entrepreneurial minded. And what's interesting about our kids, here's something, because I feel like as we were raising boys, every parent feels the pressure of, oh, college, how are we going to pay for college? That kind of thing. Well, here's a fun fact. None of our kids graduated from college. Yeah. They just didn't. And yet,
all 3 of them went. About 2 years in, they decided this was going to take way too long.
Logan got further than the other 2 did, time-wise. But, yeah.
But they ended up hiring coaches or consultants and...
self-teaching, kind of entering into a different trajectory, I guess. Yeah. So,
well, I remember when they were young. I mean, we could go so far back, but some of these stories about them and some of their first jobs. I know I'd like to go back even further than that on some of them, but I used to tell them, if you really want to make a good living, you either had to be in sales or you had to own your own business.
Yeah. Which is true.
And that was a lot of conversations with our oldest, who I think he got fired more than the other two combined at various hourly wage jobs.
He sort of did.
He kind of did.
Yeah.
But he was bored.
Probably so.
Again, and absolutely nothing wrong with an hourly wage job. I mean, it's one of those things. It's just, I know that if you want to excel, you can't be limited by an hourly wage job. And that was one of the lessons that we used with them often. If you're making an hourly wage job, you're really not getting to make your own decisions.
Yes.
So again, this is not a judgment or critique of it. It's just for our boys.
Yeah. We wanted them to go far.
We wanted them to go further than we ever did.
Here's something also I want to talk about is, how to extract goodness and greatness and all the wonderful things out of your children. One of our kids, our first child, was super strong-willed. And I remember God dealing with me about using that strong will. I would almost call him strong-willed, and it was a negative, because a strong will to a parent is not always easy.
No,
it was not easy to raise a kid who was as strong-willed as Taylor was. He was delightful, a great kid, so smart. But I remember at times in my life thinking, why can't I have TV kids? Like the TV kids that, like on the TV shows where the mom, and everything's real in TV land, where the mom says, okay, kids, go put your pajamas on and brush your teeth and go to bed. And they're like, yes, mother. And they just trot off and they do exactly what they're told. And then you don't hear from them. And my assumption while I'm watching the show is, oh, they've gone and they've done exactly as their mother asked, so we can continue the show. And I never had TV kids. And now I'm glad. I'm really glad, because they're super able to think critically, which is very difficult as they're growing older, because they challenge a lot. They ask a lot of questions. They don't just follow directions that are laid out for them, especially if they don't make sense to them.
They will challenge the status quo.
Nurturing that in a child, I mean, I don't even know. We didn't do it all right. We fumbled through much of it. And that's, I think, sometimes why I'm like, I just want to be you when I grow up, because somehow the Lord helped us to, he partnered enough with us that he helped our kids to grow into amazing individuals. And
well, we had some cute little I think they're cute one-liners too, to even help each other.
Yeah.
There were times when we would just have to look at them and say, we will outlast you.
Yeah.
Because all of them were strong-willed.
We looked at each other and said, we will outlast them. Because there are times where it's a battle of the wills. And then what makes it interesting is then we had a strong-willed firstborn. And then our second son was super compliant. He didn't rock the boat. He was pretty sensitive, whereas Taylor was not quite as sensitive. He was sensitive in his own way, but Logan, if you even looked his way, like with a scowl on your face, he would, suck his lip in and he'd start to cry. Like it didn't take much to get Logan's attention, whereas I felt like we had to move heaven and earth to get Taylor's attention.
Like to correct.
So the dynamics then of these two together and figuring out, how do we, raise them, and then the third one, Peyton he just had to be scrappy because he got it from both ends.
Yeah.
So, I think that learning how to use a strong will, or the term strong will, in a very positive way helped flip the script in my head. Because I believe that people who literally change the world and do great things, like take I don't know, a Billy Graham, say what you will about Bezos, or the guy that
guys that come to mind, like John Maxwell.
Yeah. You can't tell me that those guys were not strong-willed. You have to have strong will built into you, that strong-willed component that goes with you throughout a lifetime in order to do the things that you're called to do. And now I can look at each one of them and all of their differences, but there's a little similar thread, like a little tapestry of a strong will, if you will, that runs through all of them. It just presents differently in each one,
Yeah, what did you call it on one of the last episodes? A sacred what?
Oh, sacred rebellion.
Yeah, that.
No, sanctified.
Oh, sanctified.
If you're going to quote me, get it right. Sanctified rebellion.
Sanctified rebellion.
Where it's under the blood of Jesus, and he's helping me to keep it real and good.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah. We have a lot of stories.
Looking back on our three boys, what would you say was the mission of raising them?
The mission of raising them?
Yeah.
That's really broad.
Okay. All right. So you've used the word how do you extract greatness out of them, right? I think it's really broad to say we want to raise world changers. If you look at what they're doing, they're impacting the world. Yeah. You use the word ripple effect. It's everything that we do, or Andy Andrews is his book, Butterfly Effect. Everything that we do has a butterfly effect, a ripple effect to it. So when we've talked about what was our intent in raising the boys, I mean, we used to talk about Taylor's strong-willed. All of them have that. How do you direct it without squelching it?
You channel. You have to figure out how to channel.
Which takes a tremendous amount of resilience, patience,
time,
encouragement between the spouses.
Yeah.
But I said this earlier, and it kind of made me a little emotional, so I'll do better this time. My focus on raising those boys, were that at some point we were going to be great friends.
Yeah.
And that puts you in a perspective of you can't always be your child's friend.
No.
And I get that. But with the end result being, well, we used to have another phrase, right? I am not here to be popular with you. I am here to get you to the next level. And when I get you to the next level, we're going to be great friends.
Yeah.
They got so tired of hearing that. I know they did, because they'd get to where they'd start mocking me halfway through it, or their eyes would roll. But the intent was absolutely to get them to the next level. And we knew things they didn't yet know.
Yeah, we still do.
And we still do. You're right. Even though they are so far beyond us in their work worlds. But they are, like you said, they are just good humans. Yeah. And so maybe it would be helpful to hear some of the things that we did that worked. Obviously, some of the things didn't. I think of so many things you talked the other day about having to repent to your kids. There were so many things that I did as a dictator dad, right? There's a place for that when they're incredibly young. But when they're teenagers, that's probably the wrong time to pull out the dictator dad card.
Yeah.
That's when you have to transition into either the advocate dad or the coach dad before you ever get to the privilege of being friend dad or friend mom. Yeah. Make sense?
It does. It does. And I think learning to channel, figuring out, and it's a process for every parent. It was a process for us, and it still kind of is.
And it was different for each one.
It was different for each one, but learning how to channel those individual strengths and weaknesses, because we all have them, but helping a kid to channel that in himself and become more and more autonomous,
self-aware,
apart from you, is a big part of this. And I think, like there were things that we did with the kids, and we had different rules and regulations or different things set up in our home to accommodate that, because that's just who we were. Every family kind of does that. Mm-hmm. You have your set of spoken and unspoken things. I think making sure that children feel seen and heard We grew up in the time where children should be seen and not heard. You know that old saying.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have we said, we're not going to say this to our kids?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to tell them. And we probably did, stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Yeah, I did
like,
that.
I don't, that doesn't feel very safe to me. I mean, maybe in the heat of the moment, I might have said something along those lines, but I believe giving them space to know that they're seen and know that they're heard. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. When you've got, and I feel like everything always falls to Taylor because he's the oldest. He's the first one. And the first child goes through all the things. We cut our teeth literally on parenting with your first child, and
He's going to think this show's about him. I mean, that's just going to be another feather in his cap.
Maybe.
He'll tell his brothers,
okay.
Mom and Dad are doing a show about me.
No, I felt like there were times where he got the blame for most everything because he was the oldest, and sometimes the oldest takes most of the responsibility for things.
He earned a lot of that.
He earned a lot of it. However, I have found out later, since then, since the boys have gotten to their ages that they are now, that Logan could stir the pot and do things under the radar that I wasn't aware of, that Taylor got blamed for a lot of the times. So I don't know where, I think I read this somewhere. We gave Taylor the option to appeal.
Oh, yeah.
And that seemed to help him feel like he could be heard. Because in a moment of, all kinds of things are happening, there's total chaos and somebody's got to take control. A lot of times Taylor would maybe receive a consequence for an action that might have been unfair, that he might not have even caused. So we gave him the opportunity to appeal, but he had a couple of terms that came with that. Number one, he had to do it respectfully. Mm-hmm. He couldn't have this attitude of, you ain't listening to me and blah, 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 blah. Like, he had to do this in a respectful manner. And I think that was good because it taught him, or hopefully the goal was to teach him how to communicate in a way that somebody can actually listen to more. Because people are going to hear you if you're respectful and kind more than they're going to hear you if you have a major attitude and chip on your shoulder. And the second thing was that even after he went through the appeal process, if we decided as parents that the appeal was not upheld, then he had to be okay with that. He couldn't throw a fit. I mean, he could, but it wouldn't change. It wouldn't change the outcome. And he didn't get to take it through another appeal process. So that was just an idea. And again, I don't know where I came up with that, but if you have strong-willed children at home, that's a great idea, an age appropriate, at an age appropriate time. I think they need to be seen and heard.
Agreed.
Maybe not all the time. They need to know when to be quiet, but yeah, that was something we tried to work on. And I think here's an idea of that going wrong. You'll remember this. So as the oldest, and I was an oldest child, and I picked on my sister, maybe not as much physically as with my mouth, but boys are different. Boys are very physical. They're rambunctious. And Logan caught the brunt of that because Logan didn't stand up for himself. Logan was not one of these kids.
He was just too nice.
He was very nice, very kind. He took a lot, And I remember you standing the boys up at one point in front of each other, and you tried to make Logan punch Taylor.
I think it was your other husband.
It was my other husband? Maybe so. I don't know. And he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it because it was so wrong. It felt so wrong for him. So we don't advocate that. Some things, that's what I'm saying is we learned things the hard way. We made a lot choices. Of mistakes. We tried things and you try things and they don't work. And some things work better than others. And, and now Logan can stand up for himself like nobody's business,
Yeah.
He didn't have a problem doing that. So
Yeah. And there's been plenty of times where some of those stories amongst the boys came out years later
Yeah.
that mom didn't know about,
yeah,
some scuffles that took place
Yeah.
that you weren't aware of.
No.
And it was on a need to know basis. And
maybe so.
you
Maybe
didn't
so.
need to know.
Maybe so. Yeah, I think that if you have a strong-willed child, you need to know. You need to look at that as an asset, not a liability.
Absolutely.
Because I spent too long in those early years with Taylor thinking it was a liability. And I remember the Lord showing me, this is an asset. You just got to work with me. You got to be patient. And a lot of that, he's 35 and, God's still working it out in him, but a lot of things that I worried about and were so flustered about and thought, oh my goodness, what is actually going to happen? Kids do grow out of that.
Yeah.
Their frontal lobe finally does.
So do you want to
Finally
explain
does.
that data that you know?
I don't know. You think anyone's going to be interested in it?
Well, needless to say, the frontal lobe for boys, males, doesn't fully develop until mid to late 20s.
Yes.
So if we're expecting them to make fully adult decisions as an 18-year-old, that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Should we expect good and great things? Yes, because typically what we recognize is people will rise to the level of what's expected of them.
Yeah.
So if we don't expect much out of them,
Yeah.
we'll get that.
Yeah.
So if we expect a lot, we can get a lot, but that's also from us as parents and coaching them instead of dictating. Lead them.
Yeah.
Find out what's important to them, walk them through the process, and help them figure out a lot of these things that we know as 50-somethings that even at 30-somethings, they don't know yet.
Yeah.
So
Maybe that could be the new thing of 2025 is parents start throwing frontal lobe parties for their kids, not just birthday parties, but because that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Maybe we could get the boys, well, they're past that now. We could have gotten them a t-shirt.
Yeah.
My frontal lobe is developed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Full frontal lobe. I like that better.
Of course you would.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, raising kids, extracting greatness.
Yeah.
What else did we do? Like right now, I feel like, if you don't know our kids are pretty great.
They're good humans.
They're
Really,
good
really good
humans.
humans. I got to go to an event a couple of weeks ago, and there was about 100 plus people in the room, but I got to hear two of them speak, and to hear how they communicated as a 35 and a 30-year-old, I was impressed. Had I not been their dad, I would have still been impressed with what I heard coming from, these are young folks.
Yeah.
And then to stand around afterwards and have people come up to them and literally tell them, you've changed my life.
Or come up to you and say, you're Peyton's dad?
Oh yeah,
You're
changed.
Taylor's dad? It's like we've gone from, we are the parents, but it's like,
oh, you're
we have rock star
you're Lance's
kids.
son.
Yeah.
Well, now it's, oh, you're Taylor's dad.
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah.
yes, I am.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
How do you feel like, when if they do something great, they're my sons.
Yeah.
If they do something, then they're your sons.
That's
kind of the way it's been.
for a long time. Yeah.
How do you think, okay, here's a question I have, because for me and for you, and I can't really speak for you, even though I am
You usually do.
right now, but I know you well enough that I feel like I can in this instance.
Okay. Well,
How do you feel? I think that doesn't diminish me in any way to be known as Taylor's mom, Logan's mom, Peyton's mom. I don't feel any less of a person. I feel like it just makes me so proud.
Yeah.
Like I've always had this attitude of, if I can raise you to be a more amazing human being than I am, which probably isn't hard,
yeah.
then
I get it.
that's my goal. Like I want you to go further than I ever went, do more than I ever went, go change the world, literally. But do you think some parents would struggle with that?
Oh, I still have to come to terms with that. I have a good friend that has told me more than once, what your sons are doing is literally changing the world. You must be proud. And I would have a tendency to deflect that and say, they've made these decisions. God's input that gift in them. And he was like, real quick to correct me, he said, you planted the initial seeds. You and Allison made decisions when they were young to plant good seeds. Now they are going to get nourished, watered along the way by a host of other people. But it's like I got reprimanded basically because I would constantly want to deflect. And, obviously I want to give God the glory and the credit for that. But we did make some good decisions early on. And one of the things I do remember, as I said that, when the boys were younger, one of the things I remembered, and I don't know if I read it somewhere or if it was just through journaling or praying or whatever, but it dawned on me that if my sons had to rely on only my gifts, talents, and experiences to get them to the next level, they would be limited in what they could accomplish because I'm only one person. Yeah. And I sought out men in the business community to take them to lunch once a quarter. And they would learn from someone else. And I remember one of them was our dentist in Memphis.
Dr. Floyd.
Dr. Floyd, he was by his own, a great dentist, but he was labeled as slow and was in remedial classes all through high school because he was dyslexia.
Yeah.
And no one could figure that out.
Yeah.
So he had an experience of being labeled that wasn't correct that I could never experience to my boys. Another one was a coal leader, black gentleman in Memphis, Mr. Ben.
Yeah.
I could never communicate to any of the boys what would it be like in that skin, in his skin, in his leadership role.
Yeah.
So I was able to connect them with people that had a different life experience, life upbringing, different everything.
Different viewpoint, different everything, because they're not you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good.
That was, again, those are just examples that a myriad of people have invested in our sons.
Yeah.
So from Aaron, who's like, no, you planted some initial seeds. We created an environment or a culture that growth was an expectation. Yeah. And I think honestly why all three boys probably bailed on school is, they saw dad hire coaches and consultants, and whether it was conscious or subconscious level, they probably thought that was just normal.
Yeah.
That for them to get what they wanted and go to the next level, they had to tap into what someone else already knew.
Yeah, they did. It's funny that you say that you deflected, because I think that as a Christ follower, as a Christian, that a lot of times that deflection is a false pride. Like we were raised with the saying of, oh, don't get puffed up with pride.
Oh yeah.
Don't be boastful. Let somebody else do it. And I think that, you could get really puffed up with pride about things. We all can, about anything in our life. But when it comes to our kids, I think being proud of your kids is, that's not a puffed up thing. I think that we should, obviously we didn't do it by ourselves. Like we had help from the Lord. Like I feel like there's a partnership that for us because we were so young having kids, we had to have help, and so the partnership was born that, okay, you're going to help me do this. Just like he gave me a word. I didn't ever talk about that, did I? About the word that I feel like I got from Taylor when he was for Taylor. Yeah. No. And for those of you that don't think that God will speak to you, he will speak to you, and he'll speak to you through other people, and he'll give you what you need at the time that you need it. Because I was really at a point, at a desperation with him. He was probably 4 years old, and his Sunday school teacher had, during the middle of Sunday school,
he was trying you as a 4-year-old.
He was trying me. He tried me from the minute not from the minute he was born. That's unfair. No, sorry, Taylor, if you're listening, I do love you. But no, the Lord spoke to his Sunday school teacher one Sunday, and she told me afterwards, she said it was the strangest thing. She's like, this has never happened to me before. But he got up to answer a question, and everything kind of went dim in the room, in her mind. And there was a little light on Taylor when he stood up. And she said, I felt the Lord speak to me and say, tell his mom that little boy is going to be just fine because he's got my word all up in his heart.
And you needed that.
I needed that. And I felt like that gave me such a boost of confidence, So that's what I'm talking about, partnership, And there's been numerous other things in the raising of our kids that I know where I was sitting, when it was, when the Lord literally, sometimes he snatched me up and said, stop it. Stop. Stop doing that. Stop thinking this way. Mm-hmm. And it may not have been an audible voice, but it was so strong and so real that in my mind and in my heart, there are altars set up, healthy altars, because I need to go back and I need to remember those things. If I'm in a dry season, if I'm in a season where, we all go through seasons where we're like, oh, Lord, I need some help. Where are you? So yeah, I'm proud of those boys. I'm proud of everything that we did to raise them, and I've always said this, I'll be the first one in line to kick their tails,
Yep.
But man, I'm always the first one to say, that is my boy. I'm so proud of you. So yeah, they are great kids. So don't give up. Don't give up if you have a strong-willed kid. Don't give up if you don't know, gosh, what is this kid going to do? Like, I couldn't always put my thumb on, like, what can I see you doing? What can I envision for your life? When you have kids, you probably remember, like, different things about them. You could envision one of your kids doing this or doing that. That's why we put Taylor in debate. Yeah. Because we thought, oh, he's surely going to be a lawyer. He has so many words and he argues so well.
Yeah, he's
Way
good.
to go, son.
He's good.
But yeah.
Now, what's interesting though is now that we're empty nest, even though we've transitioned into friend mode, we're still always their parent.
Yeah.
And the moment that maybe something is needed that's outside of their realm of comfort, we're the first call. And I think we worked really hard. They worked really hard also to build that kind of relationship. And we talked the other day, is without relationship, you really don't have influence. Mm-mm. And we will continue to have influence, right? It's like, even though we are dealing with grown men,
yeah,
we still have opportunity to influence.
Yeah.
And without relationship, we wouldn't. So that's another thing. It's just because we're empty nest and just because they are all three out on their own doing well, it doesn't mean that we're done, right?
Right.
So influence.
Well, we're done. We're done with the day-to-day.
We're done with the raising.
Raising, yes. Yeah. But we're never done in their lives.
Right.
And
I'm remembered of an Ed Milet story. I got to go to one of his events when he's in town, and he told the story about, let me tell you about you. Remember telling you that story?
Oh, yeah. This is going to make you cry. Be careful.
Okay.
No, say it.
No,
because it's like really intense.
I'm not going to do it.
But it's good.
No, I'm done. You can tell it.
I wasn't there.
The short version, if you don't know Ed Milad, he's a great guy to follow as far as resource. But he got into a habit of telling his kids, let me tell you about you. Now, his kids are in their 20s at this point. So, but he made a comment that for the last 22, 23 years, he said he can count on one hand how many times or how many days he missed telling them something good about them.
Like right before bed or when?
Right when they wake up. You might send them an audio message. You might send them a text message.
Just at some point throughout the day.
Yes, sometime.
Yeah.
And what triggered it is kind of what makes, it definitely made him emotional when he was recounting the story. But, he tells a story about he was signed as a professional baseball player, got millions of dollars up front, got hurt, ended up losing everything, moved he and his wife into an apartment. And one day when she went out to go to work, her car was gone.
Oh.
It had been repossessed. And then the next day, utilities were turned off. And so they lived in this apartment, and they used to go down to the community area of the pool. He'd hold a towel up because it had 3 sides concrete. He'd hold a towel up so she could take her morning shower. Then she'd hold the towel up so he would take a morning shower. And the morning that the car was repossessed, he walked her to the bus stop, had just enough change to get her on the bus to go to work. And he walked back into his apartment, into the bedroom, fell to his knees and said, God, what do you think I can do? I can't handle this. What do you think about me? And he said for the next 40, 45 minutes, he heard words in his mind of exactly what God thought about him. You're this, you're going to do this, you have impact, influence. 40 minutes of encouraging him of what God thought of him.
Yeah.
He said nothing changed. The moment he stood up, still had no utilities.
Yeah.
The car hadn't been brought back, but he felt like $1 million. And he's like, if God telling me what he thinks about me has that much impact, I wonder if I can do that for my wife.
Oh, wow.
I wonder if I could do that for people he worked with. So he just started making a habit of, hey, let me tell you about you. Wow. So I've shared that with some of my older clients that are definitely empty nesters. And they've made a habit of reaching out to their kids periodically. They're grown kids that maybe they don't have a great relationship with. Hey, let me tell you about you.
I think you sent the boys and the girl, like all of their spouses, like a voice memo.
Yeah, after that.
Yeah.
And there was an argument in my head. It's like, they're 30 years old. They're not going to value this.
Oh. Would you value your mom and dad telling you that?
Well, yeah.
Absolutely.
But it was that argument of, do you do this and run the risk of them not appreciating it? Or you do it because it's the right thing to do, regardless of whether they even acknowledge it. Hey guys, thanks for letting me interrupt real quick. I want to talk to you about this book. It's an incredible resource to create an intentional legacy. It's called the Legacy Navigator. Came out earlier this year. It is chock full of exercises, real life examples, and in the appendix in the back, it's a literal blueprint to help you create an intentional legacy. Many people talk about whether they're going to have a legacy or not. I promise you, you will. It's either the default one, the one that you just created by accident, or it's one that you created intentionally. The intentional legacy is vastly different from one that you just settle for. So I want to encourage you to take a look at the book. There's a QR code that you can scan. It's on Audible. It's on Amazon. I'd love for you to check it out.
I think that's a good point to make because we're talking about empty nest and sometimes the struggle, the delicate dance you do as a parent with your kids to transition to live outside of the empty nest and beyond. A gift that you give your children, whether it's time, words, sometimes money, whatever that might be, their appreciation of it is not on us.
Right.
And the expectation of that should be, I believe we should let that go.
Totally.
Because sometimes if people don't show appreciation in the way that we think that they should, I think that I see this a lot online with empty nest parents or the issue of, oh, we've done this and this and this and this for you. And it's painful. And then the reciprocation doesn't hit them the way that it needs to hit them. And then there's a rift between them. There's a wall that's put up. There's, hurt feelings. And then we don't talk about it and it stews. And then all of a sudden it blows up. And I think that letting go of the expectation on their end to appreciate or to respond in such a way is important. Because if my kid didn't appreciate something for them, would I withhold that then the next time?
Shouldn't.
I wouldn't.
If you're a 58-year-old immature person, then yeah, you would withhold it, right?
Well, you tell me all the time I'm immature.
That's a different topic. But no, if you think about what I learned from that, all of them did respond to let me tell you about you.
Yeah.
And I think the message that I really felt was, it doesn't matter how old your kids get, they will value being pursued.
Yes.
And honestly, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
If I were to wait, though, and feel like I'm invited in to just let me tell you about, how long would I wait? Who does it hurt? Who does it impact?
Yeah.
What does it,
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like the old adage of, why would you withhold a blessing? When you are telling somebody about them,
Yeah.
that's going to be a blessing.
Yeah.
So,
You're right.
and the clients that are doing that with their kids, the feedback has been restoration of relationships.
Yeah.
And think about it, that's not that hard.
Yeah.
But, back to raising great humans.
And extracting greatness. I think another thing that you did was you took them to business events. You took them to podcasts, or not podcasts, simulcasts.
When we were growing up, there was no such thing as a podcast.
There was no such thing as a podcast.
We had AOL dial-up. Do you remember that?
I do.
Oh my gosh.
I actually remember when we started getting internet, and this is really funny because I'm going to tell it myself, but it's hard to be like literate in technology sometimes when you're our age. But I remember thinking, oh, this is a phase. This won't last. And I guess I was wrong on that.
Anyway,
one.
so what was your story? Where were you headed?
No, you took the boys
Oh.
to simulcasts. You took them
Yeah.
to business leadership events. Yeah. And I know one of the reasons that you've talked about in the past is that you wanted them to get used to being in the room. You wanted them to be able to be around wealthy, like people with big influence, big business cards, and not feel intimidated.
I wanted them to have a healthy respect for wealth and resources and leadership without being intimidated by it.
Yes.
So this was after we'd finished homeschooling and we began to put them back into public school, because I remember getting notes from the teachers or administration
Yeah.
that I was harming their growth.
It wasn't always an approved.
It was never an
absence.
approved absence because they weren't sick, but I took them to a leadership event. And at that time, we started that when they were 13 and above. There were concepts talked about, there's no way they would have understood, but each of them have come back at different points and saying that makes sense now. I think Taylor would say the main reason he went was because Chick-fil-A was the sponsor and they provided the sandwiches for lunch. But yeah, I wanted them to have a healthy respect for wealth and leadership without being intimidated by it. So I wanted that to become an expectation of their expectation.
Yeah.
I wanted to help set the stage for them to expect bigger things out of themselves.
Yeah. What else do you think that we did, or any ideas for parents to pull like greatness out of their kids?
Again, we were very intentional on it, on a lot of things, but we were intentional on asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, we did.
After 9/11, that was one of the very first things that we did that was highly intentional, because you were really concerned about how were they going to process what just took place on the world stage. And I had a trip that was supposed to go out of town that day, canceled the trip, went and bought what was called a chimenea.
A clay chimenea.
It was like a clay fire pit, but
Yeah.
we bought that, and we learned something through that. Is we learned that if you provide food and fire for boys, they'd literally sit and talk to you for hours.
Oh, they will tell you everything that you ever want to know about them.
But it allowed us.
Was that manipulation?
Yes.
That was a little manipulative.
It was a
wasn't
healthy
it?
one.
Yeah. It's kind of
But what it did is it allowed us, though, to begin to ask questions. And it's like a lot of things that I think it had to be a God thing that we did certain things, because I did not know about the psychology of asking questions and what that did to strategic and critical thinking. But it forced these young men to begin answering questions because they had to think through the answers. And then we tied that into the family vision cast, and what would we like to repeat from last year? We did a series of questions, and then into the new year, what do you want to accomplish this next year? Mm-hmm. That was just a new habit, that we did, and it forced them to begin to move into critical thinking, goal setting, target setting. Mm-hmm. And basically all I did is I used all the things that corporate had provided me to train and develop my team. changed the verbiage to be personal words,
Yeah.
and we brought it home. And I was really surprised how well it fit and how well it was received.
I think it got them used to just verbalizing things. I think from some of the things that I remember of those early talks, it helped them to offload some fear. Because look, Peyton was young enough. I don't know that he really knew what was happening. He did, but he doesn't. I don't know that it's a huge memory for him. But Logan understood. Taylor really understood in a bigger way because he was older.
Yeah.
So I think helping kids to offload fear, because what is one of the biggest things that holds you back from stepping out and doing great things? Fear. All the voices in your head. Mm-hmm. So giving them an avenue to offload fear. Think about even with you and I, like sometimes getting a fearful thought or something that we've been mulling around for a while that we're maybe afraid of, or that's a frightening possibility, offloading that and getting it out. You've always said getting thoughts out of your head and writing them down even in the absence of talking them out, at least gets them out. And then you've got room for more possibility and replacing with different thoughts.
Yeah.
So, and I think for kids, it's huge.
In the old adage of, if people would say, well, I can't control what I think, right? We can't control necessarily what thought jumps in, but we can control what stays in. And that's why getting out, scripture says, think on these things. Philippians 4:8, it's just like, these are the things that you're supposed to think on. And I don't believe that we would be given an instruction to think on certain things if we didn't have the ability to control what we thought on.
Yeah.
So that's a part of it. As far as something else that I think was very beneficial, you used to read a lot to the boys. Even when we would out loud,
Yeah.
Even when we would take a vacation, you would read out loud until you got car sick, because that wasn't a gift of yours to be able to read in the car. But you would read out loud, and now we know from the psychology behind it is when you're reading, especially fiction, the right side of your brain begins to fire, and the creative side. All three of the boys are just avid readers. I am 100% convinced that all leaders are readers, and we've got a ton of books in this house. Even Peyton said multiple times, the number one thing that he wants when I'm gone
is your library.
is all my books, right?
Is that really fair? Like, you should split your library up.
Well,
between the boys.
He'll claim rights of sonship.
He will, but yeah, he's got two brothers who are also sons. So anyway, we can talk about that later. Yeah, those are some good ideas. So a lot to think about when it comes to pulling out the good things. I think you have to be focused on those things, focused on, we talked about on another episode, the long game.
Yeah.
I don't know why do I always do this when I say long game? It's almost like I can't say the words without doing this.
Okay.
I'm going to sit on my hands. The long game, and you have to be focused on the long game when you think about extracting things from your kids that are good things, and helping them to, not sit in the things that are bad, because we've got good, we've got bad. We've got things that we fight. We have things that we want to be better at doing and nurture in our character on any given day. And yeah, it's a lot to think about.
So I'm gonna watch your face here. If you can zoom in on her face, I want to see what this happens.
Wait.
What role can you play in the future development of your grandkids?
Wow. Well, I have read studies. This is no joke. Studies that show that children are better developed when they spend regular time with grandparents. And I think that it helps grandparents. It helps us live longer. Like, I am convinced of it, because there is something that being with those kids does for me that is just.
Well, I know one thing you've said more than once they're motivating you to keep in better health because you are dead set on being able to run around the yard with them or crawl around on the floor with them. So I know they're good for your health.
Yeah, they are. They are. Like I used to tell Kate, our granddaughter, because I've worked out my whole life and had a knee injury, and then it just, when your workouts stop, it's really hard. It's really hard. And so I've been in some physical therapy and gone to workouts and stuff, but she knows, she can tell if I'm sore because I've always told her, I go and work out so I can carry you up the stairs. And so there's been so many times, more than I can even count, like her little tiny lovely person of a girl will look at me and she'll say, Owie, is this why you work out? As I'm carrying her up the stairs. And so, yeah, like they just, extracting greatness from grandkids. And that's
a new phase.
That's a whole other topic that we'll get into next episode as far as
we will?
Grandchildren and empty nesting and, daughters-in-law and sons-in-law and everything that goes with that because, I love being a part of my grandkids' lives, and I love being able to come alongside my kids and support how they raise, being respectful of the things that I saw. Somebody sent me a TikTok the other day, and if you don't like TikTok, sorry.
Get over it.
Yeah, that could be a little bit of a trigger word lately, but where it was this grandmother who's like just being a grandma to this little girl, and the mom, everything that the grandma says, the mom, like it pans to her face and she's like, oh, don't say this. We say this now. Kind of like this is the new parenting. And by the end of the TikTok video, the grandma's like so confused and frustrated. And, she's like, it's a really funny TikTok. But
I guess you'd have to see it.
You probably have to see it, but I think it's, it's a parody of how, you try to come alongside and go with the parents' wishes, and I'm learning a lot through watching Lindsay and Taylor parent too.
They're great parents.
They're really good parents. Such good parents. Yeah. I'm so proud of them. So waiting for more grandbabies. So yeah. What else? What do you think? Have we run the gamut of the whole thing?
What about our live studio audience? Anything else?
You said you had your kids around a lot of leaders. How did you make sure they were able to interact with them? How did you grow your kids into leaders, not just being around, but how did you grow them into leaders practically?
Okay, great topic. I was so...
Can you repeat the question and then answer?
So the question was, I was intent on getting the boys around leaders. How did I make sure that they could interact with them well?
And lead.
And then eventually lead. What was interesting about our household is, even though we only had 3 boys, there was constantly a lot more than just 3. And a lot of these other young men that were in the house, they were either from single parent households or they were from households where the dad was physically there and that's it. So we had an opportunity to invest in far more than just our 3. And at one point I was not frustrated, but I recognized that there was a gap in how these young boys were even interacting with me. And it dawned on me that they weren't getting, this sounds arrogant, I apologize, but they weren't getting what our boys were getting. So
active, you were an active dad in their lives.
I was active as intentional, but it was more than just being present. I wanted them to have leadership skills. And so I created a workshop, and it was called Young Leaders Workshop. And it was such basic stuff that you and I would think, well, this is common sense. But again, my dad used to say, common sense ain't all that common because you're not aware of what you don't know. But it was basic things on how do you shake hands? When you're talking to somebody, how do you make proper eye contact? When you're asked a question, how do you give eye contact and respond back? When someone takes you to lunch, how do you even order off of a menu? When do you order off a menu?
just basic respect and
Yeah, and it was things, and I had honestly forgotten about that until this last week when I was at this event. I was mentioned that I got to hear two of the boys speak. One of the young men that was in that workshop a decade ago, no, probably almost 20 years ago,
Yeah.
he brought it up and said, I was in that workshop that you did, and the things that I learned, he said, I have not forgotten. Kind of blew my mind because I'd forgotten he was even in it. But it was like being able to interact with other leaders. That's what that little workshop taught. And I'd forgotten about it.
Well, and here's a story. This is a little different, but I remember, I think helping your kids walk out. What does it look like to walk out being a leader? You just have to do it. I remember Peyton's, was he a junior, sophomore or junior? He was active in Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FCA, at school. And I think he was the president of the club, or he just had some sort of like office in the club. And they had gotten to school one day really early and they filled out all these sticky notes with encouraging scripture.
Like 600 of them.
It wasn't like, we're encouraging people to walk the aisle and accept Christ, or it had nothing to do with baptism or exorcism or anything.
You're a winner. You're an overcomer.
Or, you're
just encouraging phrases.
God's going to supply everything that you need, in this event, whatever. Put them on lockers. And he and these kids got in trouble for that. And we, as parents, we didn't agree with it. I remember telling him that's what you were led to do. And we didn't encourage him to be rebellious and get kicked out of school.
A sanctified rebellion, maybe?
That was a sanctified rebellion. But I think, encouraging your kids, even in leadership, things like that. No, you stand up for what is right and for what you believe the Lord has told you to do, and don't back down. Like, I remember as you were talking, that was a very clear, to me, example of encouraging him to lead.
Yeah.
Little things like that I think that.
And, that was as, what you would call an active dad or an intentional dad. But how many grandparents could be doing that same thing as far as, because empty nesters, they've got a lot to offer. We have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
Our job isn't done at all.
Yeah. We taught them.
Talking about this on a podcast that we didn't have access to when we were growing up. Yeah.
We taught them how to goal set through our yearly planning things.
Yep.
And it's been fun to watch over the years how those goals have evolved because,
they do their own. Our first Friday that we do, we met one of our sons not too long ago at Topgolf. And when we walked in, he and his wife were sitting off to the side. They were doing their own First Friday.
Yeah. Getting
on the same page as a young couple, no kids, but being intentional with what their future is going to look like.
So did you do anything? I can't remember what we did with them because they're pretty high achievers now. Very driven. We didn't do anything like high achiever wise. Like, I don't even know, that probably wasn't even on my radar as they were growing up, but getting them used to be like a high achiever, like their capacity to do a lot of things, carry a lot of things, keep a lot of things spinning, like in that high achieving arena.
We did. And, like things immediate come to mind, like Peyton, for example, was big into cross country and sports. And so he had very clear targets, down to the second of what did he want to accomplish. And then we would reverse engineer that. And I would have to ride a bike to try to keep up. I just could not keep up with him. But that was one of the things that he was very clear on. After graduation, or high school graduation, I remember I used to meet Taylor at Starbucks every Saturday morning. And it was one of those things that if he initially would he'd show up late, I would just remind him, when you show up late, even though it's me, you're disrespecting my time. Because if I'm willing to invest, you need to be there on time. And so he took it. He was very coachable, and he would recognize that someone's willing to invest in me. And so there was just a lot of little things that begin to pile up over time. That, again, it's all about being intentional, understanding the long game. Did I do it right? Recognizing the long game, that the intent was to create incredible humans that we were going to be great friends with in the future, that they were successful based upon our definition of success is just being good humans.
Yeah.
The amount of money that they make is fantastic, but that is not what makes them a great human.
Yeah.
So
I think too, even fostering their individual interests is a big deal, because we also had a kid who this was a whole new world for me. I mean, he could read encyclopedias and so
retain
smart
stuff. Yeah.
And I remember he was in junior high and high school, and knew how to grow aquarium plants and fish, and I probably learned everything that I never wanted to know about snails during this time. And now this kid, if something happened, he's the most self-sufficient of them all. He can grow a garden. He can build things. It's like, he's high achieving in a lot of different things. Yeah. But that's one of the things I respect most about him is like, man, in a zombie apocalypse, you're going to fare pretty darn good.
Well, and this is one of the things we talk about, or I talk about in the book, the Legacy Navigator book, is as a dad, finding interests that interest your sons or your daughters.
Yeah.
It would have been so much easier because of my sports background. I would have to make everybody be sports guys. Each one of them had totally different interests. And it was a challenge to figure out, how can I be highly interested in what interests them? And so again, being that intentional side is, if I want to get into their world, I have to make the change to adapt to get into them instead of forcing them to get into mine.
Absolutely.
So
I agree.
Other thoughts?
I have another question.
Yeah.
You talked about telling your kids, like, let me tell you about you. I'd be curious to hear Allison, tell Lance about the parent that he is, and Lance tell Allison about the parent that she is.
Yeah.
Off camera, maybe?
No.
It's going to make Lance cry.
It will. Man, I was the most non-emotional person ever. They used to call me the Stone Mountain.
No, the black hole.
Well, that was basketball.
Stone Mountain.
Stone Mountain. Because I was stoic. It was just like, it's just a matter of business. Because that was back when that nickname was there. The walls were still up. You didn't get in, period, because you didn't need in, right? But the older I've gotten, recognize, you know what? Life is more than that.
Well, you know what I think is interesting about that is, because I've thought about this a lot of times, like when you get married to somebody, you don't know, you don't know yet what kind of father, mother, you don't know what's down the road. And while there's always things, I know there's a lot of things I say, how many times do you wake up in the morning and turn over and look at me and you're like, what did I do 37 years ago?
Never thought that.
But I mean, it's like we're not always going to meet those standards that maybe we set for each other. However, I do believe that in the scope of what we're talking about and raising kids and having boys, there are things I don't think that I could have picked a better person to raise the boys that we have, I think I talked the other day on another episode about how I buffered a lot.
Yeah, you did.
But boys have to have you've got to have strong leadership. I mean, God puts testosterone in boys for a reason. And so obviously, for me, for a mom who runs mainly on estrogen rather than testosterone, it's true. Sometimes that gets a little uncomfortable because I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But
I remember there were plenty of times I said, we do not need a buffer right now.
Oh yeah,
and you were like, oh yes, you do.
Oh yes, you do. Or sometimes I would just politely see myself out of the room. But yeah, I think that's been a big thing that looking back, I'm really, really grateful. And I didn't ever have to sit around wondering, oh my gosh, like, is my husband going to be able to shoulder up under and bear the burden of this, or this? Like, I never had to worry about, I knew you weren't out like gallivanting around, cheating on me, having girlfriends on the side and all that stuff, because you were usually on the phone with me if you were on a business trip after the business was conducted.
The others would
So,
go
yeah.
to the bar and I'd go back to the room and call you.
So there's a lot of things, a lot of good things. And, and I tease you about being polypurebred. That's a whole other episode, because we had kind of different backgrounds. And then when we met, we were just living and doing different things, And so, but I think knowing that there were strong moral principles in you that just didn't, you might bend, but you never broke them. Because I think sometimes as a parent, you have to be able to bend. There has to be some flexibility. There has to be some give, but you're always there. You're always stable. You wake up and you're pretty much the same every day, for 37 years.
How boring, right? How boring is that?
I don't know.
So let me tell you about you.
you.
God is so incredibly proud of you. You're an amazing mom. You're an amazing grandmother.
Yeah.
You're incredibly loyal. You're an amazing cook.
Yeah. I can cook.
You can cook. And you still have all your teeth.
I still have all my teeth. That's right. That's a joke, an inside joke. Yeah.
For another time.
For another time. Yeah.
Yeah. You could not be more passionate about your kids and your grandkids, about Jesus.
Yeah.
So he is incredibly proud of you.
Thanks, Pop Bear. Yeah.
What else?
That's all I've got for now. Is there any encouragement you would give to people? Maybe they don't feel like they've done a good job up to this point, but their kids are still like below 18. They haven't moved out yet. What would be your advice to people that feel like, maybe I've really messed it up? What's step one?
So the question was, what do you do as a parent? You still have children at home under 18 and you feel like you've either missed the mark or messed up. What would you advise them as far as maybe a considered logical next step?
If you know that there are things that you've done that have injured a relationship or caused your child to, not be doing well, and I think, we take on a lot of the guilt and responsibility of that. And I think that's kind of nuanced. I think there's always other things at play. So I would caution you, first of all, to take all of that on yourself. But if there are obvious things that are going on, or you've dropped the ball and you've been non-existent, I believe the first step is to have an honest conversation with that child. And
whether it's business or personal, when someone is willing to walk into a scenario and say, I messed up, it immediately drops the walls.
Yeah.
It's incredibly hard to be defensive and repentant at the same time. And repent, remember, the only thing that means is I changed the way I think. But when you can ask for forgiveness and apologize for maybe not being there, and then you ask, what do you need from me? What do you need? So if they're in the upper, 15, 16, 18, somewhere in that range, they really do have a full capacity to have dialogue. And as long as you create an environment that is what we would consider a safe environment to have a conversation like that, you have to, first of all, come at it from a position of whatever your answer is, I'm going to accept. Because even if you don't believe it's true, what they're saying about you or what the situation, that is their perception of reality, and that's what you get to deal with. So the first thing for me is, son, daughter, I feel like I've messed up. I haven't been what you needed. What do you need from me now? How
can I make this right?
How can we make this better? In line with that, this is some advice I've given Taylor over the, in just the last, 10 months maybe. I've encouraged him to become a student of Kate's eyes. I don't have any data to back this up yet. It may be coming somewhere, but I am convinced that if he becomes a student of Kate's eyes while she's little, he will begin to understand what she's thinking when she's a teenager. So when he's looking at her now, when he walks into the house, her eyes light up.
Totally.
She is daddy's girl. When she's frustrated with him, her eyes won't even make eye contact.
Yeah.
This is at a 5-year level. What happens now if he becomes a student of her eyes when she's a teenager? And he has become so intentional about what do these eyes mean, because eyes communicate. I'm convinced that at that age, he will be able to know literally what she's thinking before her mouth ever opens.
Like a mind reader?
Not quite.
He'll be able to gauge where she is.
Where she is, if she's telling the truth, if
Yeah.
she's happy with him, if she's whatever.
Yeah.
So he has taken that, and it's like, so now when she talks, phone's down, and he's intentional, making eye contact.
And
So
if
we'll
you're
see.
a believer, I think bringing the Lord into stuff. And I know, sometimes in church circles that becomes such a cliche thing and a pat answer. But I believe that there's been more than one occasion where God has helped us map out a plan of action.
Yeah, that's true.
For getting out of a rut, getting out of a hole, like trying to reverse something that we messed up. But I don't think you can ever go wrong with communication and really mean it. And here's another thing that
You
I feel
definitely
like,
can't put your head in the sand and expect it to work out.
no,
That just doesn't work.
but I think children are incredibly perceptive. We don't always realize how perceptive that they are. And
resilient.
If what we're saying, if we don't follow up with that, like they're going to know it. They sniff that out.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I don't want my children to lose respect for me because I don't follow up with something that I say I'm going to do. I think that was a big thing with the boys, but especially with Taylor, because if we didn't follow through with something, or if there was even a hint where he got a whiff of us maybe possibly not following through, we got called on it. And so
He could sniff out weakness.
oh yeah. So
That
there's
help?
always hope. There's always hope. Yeah. There's always hope.
Really good.
Yeah.
Would you guys mind taking a minute to just pray for young parents that might be
Yeah.
listening, that are feeling like, how do I begin to foster greatness in my kid? Like I saw
Yeah.
you do this one thing and and it was kind of frustrating, but like I want to foster this. Could you just pray into that for anyone
Yeah.
who might be watching?
Yeah.
You want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Father, I just thank you, Lord, today. I thank you, God, for families. I thank you for the idea of family, because I know that was your idea from the very beginning. And Father, I know that there are people, God, all over the place that are, some families are in smooth waters right now, and other families might be in choppy waters, and they're not sure what they're going to do or where they're going to go from here. And Lord, I just want to, first of all, speak peace over situations, speak peace over families that are in the middle of choppy waters. And Father, I thank you, God, that there is nothing too big for you. Father, I pray for opened eyes and opened hearts, Lord. Give parents the eyes to see what you want them to see, because some things are hidden deep within kids that require a lot of time and a lot of effort to pull out, Lord. So I pray for patience, open eyes, Father, open hearts. And God, I pray, Lord, for strength for the battle, Lord, because this is the long game. And God, I thank you, Lord. I pray that if there's parents, Father, that are just not sure that there's anywhere for them to turn or anywhere to go, because maybe they think that their situation is too difficult, too dire. God, I know you are the God of hope, Lord, and I pray that you would bring hope into their lives, Father. I pray that somehow, Lord, that you would speak, that you would bring a sign, bring some sort of just an obvious intervention, God, to where parents cannot, they can't shove something off as coincidence, Lord. I pray that you would meet parents right where they are. You've met us so many times, and you still will, Lord. And Father, I just thank you, God, that we are never left alone, that we're never left without hope, and that, Father, you love us so much that you want to be invited into each little situation of our lives. And I thank you for that. I thank you for stories that are going to come out of this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. I want to piggyback real quick on one word you used more than once, and that's the word hope. The real definition of hope is a confident expectation of things to come, not a position of weakness where, oh, I hope this works out. I hope I make this. I hope I survive. That's a weak version of what the real intent is. So the real meaning of hope that I want everyone to lean into is that confident expectation of things to come.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. What are we going to talk about next time? You know?
I have no idea. You're going to surprise me again,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
You want to leave any comments on anything? Any thoughts?
Us to leave
What
thoughts?
do you guys want to know from the audience? Tell them.
Oh, we want to know. What do you think about this?
What
Yay?
topics do you want
Yeah.
whether parents with kids at home or empty nesters? Love
it
to
helping?
hear what kind of information do you want?
You want
And
more jokes from me?
And if we don't know it, she'll make it up
Yeah.
the long way.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about more deep empty nest things next time, like relationships with whoever your kids marry, grandchildren, setting boundaries, holidays,
Ooh, holidays.
all the things. So, see you next time.
Beautiful.